Shalom and welcome to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, Messianic Rabbi Eric Walker. In 2001, Robin and his wife Erica received the news that their newborn baby had a severe brain abnormality and would only live 6 to 12 months. Their daughter Kennedy just turned 18 years old and continues to defeat the odds. She lives with many disabilities and requires 24-hour care. Robin speaks all over the world about the incredible life lessons they've learned along the way. You can follow their journey at mademeaningful.com. Robin Steele is the founder and lead pastor of Promised Land Church in San Marcos, Texas. Over the last 16 years, they've gone from 30 people to a membership well over 2,000. Promised Land is a multi-ethnic, multi-generational congregation that impacts people from all walks of life. He loves to teach, disciple, invest in pastors, hunt, fish, and ride his mountain bike real fast over crazy terrain. Joining us now to share insights into his new book, How to Be Made Whole, an answer to the whole, and that's with a W, question, is Robin Steele. Robin, welcome to Revealing the Truth.
So much, Rabbi. It's an honor to be with you.
Well, it's an honor to have you with us, and what a journey. What a journey from being a man of faith, being delivered news that no one is ever prepared to hear. But yet, the journey that you have been on has been used for the glory of God. It is the Genesis 50, verse 20 testimony that what the enemy meant for evil, God will work for his good so that many will be saved.
Absolutely.
But your journey didn't begin in 2001 with this diagnosis. Your beginning began as little Robin, maybe Batman's buddy. I'm not sure where you were in that continuum. But take us back to the early developmental years when you first embraced faith, and then the steps you took to answering the call to ministry.
Well, you know, my journey began when I was in the womb myself, and my mom was actually in church when she went into labor with me, and she left church, went straight to the hospital. I was born on early Monday morning, and then the next Sunday I was back at church, but this time I was outside of the womb. And so from a very, very early age, I've been in church. I've been in the Christian community. I have phenomenal parents. They've been so supportive and helpful to me along the way. And so I was raised in a very traditional church in Austin, Texas, and just loved life. I was very I guess sheltered may be a good word. My parents were pretty successful business people. They owned a construction company. And so, you know, I didn't have many challenges throughout my life. I was very connected at school, had a lot of friends. I had a sister who was a close friend of mine as well. I started in high school feeling like, man, I just feel a little different, you know. I feel like maybe God's calling me to something, and I would pray about it. I would lay there in bed at night and kind of look out the window and just pray to God and think about it. Didn't know how to process those feelings, and so finally I went to my pastor and I said, I feel like I'm called to ministry, and he said, okay, well, I want you to start teaching Sunday school. And so he put me in the third grade class and with somebody, and man, I just went at it. And from those early years, just seeking after God and trying to really pour my life into it. And I ended up going to Texas State University, and I got a degree in marketing because I just have that business mindset, and I wasn't sure, you know, if this was going to be a full-time ministry or bivocational. And so that's the route I went, and I just started really diving into scripture and studying the word and going through not only my secular studies but also biblical studies. And I met my wife at church, and we got married right after I graduated from college. And at that point, I went into bivocational. I was a youth pastor, and I was working for my dad's construction company. And just a great life. I mean, we were newly married, uh, didn't have a lot of possessions or money, but just had so many blessings, And so right after we got married, we decided to move to New Mexico because my wife wanted to become a midwife. And so there was this great school in New Mexico. So we loaded up the moving van and a couple dogs, and we went up to New Mexico and lived up there for a while. And then my wife got pregnant with our first child, and we decided, you know what, we need to get back near home, near family, grandparents. And so at that point, we moved back to the Austin area, and at that point, I became a full-time pastor. I was children's pastor at my home church, and we were just excited. My wife had a perfect pregnancy. She was not ever morning sick. She never had a headache. All the signs of pregnancy were perfectly normal. And as I mentioned earlier, she wanted to be a midwife, and so she was very much into natural things, natural medicine and home birth. So that was the route we were taking. And I was like, well, I think we might should just go get a sonogram and just see, what it's going to be like. And so that was the beginning of this next journey, that we were about to go on.
You actually went to a community college
Yeah.
for the sonogram.
We went to a community college because we didn't have much money, and these community colleges offering free sonograms, obviously trying to train the students. And so we said, well, that fits our budget. So we went to this community college and, started the sonogram process. And I'd never been in that situation. I had no idea what to expect or what was going on. But my wife was like, yeah, something's not right. The students kept going in and out, wouldn't tell us anything, just kept going in and out of the room. Finally, after about an hour, a supervising nurse came in and said, look, we're not seeing something we think we should. And so we're going to send you to a specialist, a neonatal obstetrician that specializes in high-risk pregnancy. You need to go today. And so we're like, we left that community college and we're like, why did we go there? They don't know what they're doing. They're students. We should have splurged and just gone to a real doctor. And we just thought, well, we'll go to this next doctor and he'll confirm that everything's fine, and we'll just go on about our life. So I remember going back to the church that afternoon, and they asked, a couple people asked how things went. We said, they saw a little something different, but we're going to go to a specialist. And so we went to the specialist that afternoon and went into a second sonogram, and that was a different environment, obviously, very professional, very experienced. And that stenographer took a long time as well. And then finally, the doctor came in and he said, look, I need you guys to come back to my office. So like there's a doctor's office, and then there's the doctor's office, like back in the back.
Right.
I'd never been there before. And so this was a tough walk down that hallway. And we got back there, and our world just came to this crashing halt, because he said the thing that the community college could not see was your daughter's brain. And when we look at her skull on the sonogram, it's basically just a ring with gray mass. There's no lines, there's no tissue. It's basically just fluid. And if you look at the very edge of the skull, you can kind of see a little tissue there. That's the brain tissue. But everything else is just brain fluid. And so this is called hydrocephalus. And, your child will be born with a lot of complications. We don't really know what's going to happen because we don't know what's there. And then he gave us a couple of options. He said, in Texas, you can't have an abortion at 30 weeks, but if you would like, you can travel to Kansas and get a late-term abortion. if that's a route you want to take, or you can choose to continue with the pregnancy, and I will help. You can come here every week for new sonograms, and at 38 weeks, we'll do a C-section delivery. So that's the route we chose. You know, we truly believed that God was going to show up and that God was going to make a way. And so we rallied the troops, pastors and family members and friends, co-workers. I mean, everybody was praying and just believing God was going to show up as some sort of miraculous thing. And we would go back each week to the sonogram, and the doctor would say, well, the only thing that's changed is that it's gotten worse. The head's getting bigger, the fluid's getting greater, it's not being relieved. And so every week we had these difficult meetings with the doctor, and finally 38 weeks came, and it was time for the C-section. And at this point, we're like, okay, we're going to go, and this is where God's going to show up. This is where God's going to be revealed. They're going to bring up this baby, and at one point in the process, we asked the doctor, look, what's the gender? At this point, we didn't know, and we said, hey, we need to know what's going on, and he said it's a girl. So we knew we were going to have a little girl, and we were just so excited. We just knew as soon as the doctor lifted her out of that womb that it would be the best thing ever, So we were there, and it was amazing. I mean, birth is incredible. It's a miracle. There's nothing like seeing a human coming out of another human being, So that was amazing. But then our hearts sank because we realized that her head was still just really, really big. It was way larger than a normal baby. And they immediately whisked her away to the ICU, and they did an MRI. And I remember this moment like it was yesterday, literally. It's been almost 19 years. But we sat in this little bitty dark room where they slid the slides of the MRI up on the wall. And the brain surgeon said, look, the condition is worse than we thought. It's not just fluid, but the brain didn't develop properly, and it didn't divide into two halves. We don't know what's there. We don't know what tissue's there. We don't know what's not there. And so there's really no way of giving you a good prognosis. But most kids that have this condition live 2 months to 6 months. And there's just a small handful that live a couple years. So basically the idea, he said, was just take her home and enjoy her. And it was stunning. We were shocked. And that was, reality. This reality of we thought it was going to happen a certain way. It didn't. And it just really, really drove us to question so many things. We never got bitter at God. We never were angry at God. But we obviously had many, many difficult conversations with God, trying to wrestle through this new reality.
Obviously, you mounted up on with every prayer warrior, but there's that part of us that confuses doubt as being the absence of faith, but yet doubt creeps in. And questions creep in, and the focus on the questions sometimes can distract you from the faith, and the waters get murky, and the seeds of doubt, and people say things, and sometimes those things stick when they're not from the Lord, they're not from the Word, but they're the ones that when you close your eyes, there's ones you hear. You had an 8-week period in there of hope seasoned with complete unknown, uncertainty. The medical community is telling you no, 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 no at every turn. you're looking for a maybe, you're looking for a 1% possibility,
Mm-hmm.
and you're getting a no, 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 no. Brought you and Erica closer,
Mm.
because for so many, it tears them apart.
Yeah. Yeah, when our child was still in the womb, uh, there was this question of how's it going to work? It's going to work, but just how? And then when she's out of the womb, all of a sudden it's like, wow, okay, this is real. This is really happening, and it's not happening the way we thought it was going to happen. And so there was a it's really a realignment of the way we think it's going to happen and the way God is able to show up in a way that we had no idea that it could happen. And that's I know for everybody that's a different process, but it's a process, like we all have to get through that place. As I said earlier, up until this moment, I had fixed my problems with either working harder or my charisma, making people like me, studying harder. I found a way, there was always a way to fix it. Or God showed up and fixed it. But there was always fixing going on. And it wasn't until this moment where there was nothing we could do. Money wasn't going to fix it. They could do a surgery to alleviate that pressure in the brain, the water. They could take the water out of the skull, but it would do nothing to fix the brain itself. So we were just at this place, and you said something about what people say, and they can say some crazy things. And just a couple days after she was born, I was standing there at her crib, and I looked down, and there was a clipboard at the base of her crib that had doctor's notes. Now there's computers at every bed, and
Right.
everything's digital. But then it was a handwritten clipboard, and the doctor had written, "The parents understand their daughter will not have a meaningful life." And I just happened to see it. I glanced down and read that the doctor says, in fact, it said, she has no chance of having a meaningful life. And I was just so upset. I was so angry, and really wanted to go find that doctor right then. And but it set us on a journey. That statement was a catalytic moment for us that really set us on a journey to look for meaning. What defines meaning? Who defines meaning? What is meaning? How does meaning get to a person? What does it take? And I've often thought, what would that doctor have to see before he said she was meaningful? Would she have to walk, or would she have to talk? And the medical community was amazing. They took care of our daughters extremely well from a medical standpoint. And this doctor wasn't trying to be mean or spiteful or anything. It was just a human condition saying that we define meaning a certain way, and we define good a certain way, we define pretty a certain way, and obviously your daughter's not going to fit that, so she's not meaningful. And that's a crossroad that my wife and I were at, that we just were like, you know what, we have to go to God, because he is doing something here that we can't figure out. And he's gonna be the one that makes this decision on meaning, and it's gonna be through him. And there's one other moment there in the hospital that was really pivotal for us, where my wife was actually still in her hospital bed recovering from the C-section, and I went back to visit her after visiting my daughter. And I was at this big moment. I was like, you know what, I know that God can heal her still, even after she was born. And I can pray that and believe that. So that was my option A. Like, God, you can still heal her. You can form that brain in the head. Now you can do it. But option B was, you know what? just take her home. She can pass. She can dance on streets of gold. We can totally release her to you. And in my mind, that was the way he was going to do it. It was either going to be A or B. But as you mentioned, in the intro, neither one of those prayers were answered. You know, she wasn't healed to that degree, and she never died. She hasn't died yet. So we're in this plan C, this other plan. And when I stood there with my wife in the hospital, I had no idea that God was so good that there could be a plan C and that we'd have a blessed life. It's definitely not a normal life, but it's a life that is incredibly blessed. And it really does, as you said in Genesis, the devil meant it for evil, but God finds a way to turn this extremely broken situation into something that could be extremely powerful and meaningful.
This is not the work of the enemy. This is not what many would say, wow, they're really going under a lot of spiritual warfare. This is a medical situation that happened in utero, unanticipated, unavoidable. Nothing could have been done. But God left you a message on a clipboard.
Yeah.
Not a doctor. God left you a message. And the message was a challenge. Oh, man of faith. Oh, man of God. It's easy for you to get up there and preach the message of hope when there's hope. But how do you preach a message of hope when there's hopelessness? How do you preach wholeness when you're broken? How do you put meaning, which is by sight, and give it meaning by faith?
Yeah.
I don't think the doctor wrote that note on that chart.
Yeah.
I think God wrote that note to you, knowing who you were, knowing what was going to kindle a fire in you, to ignite in you a throwdown and a challenge to tell you, I'll show you meaningful.
Yeah.
And instead of 2 months or 6 months, we're talking about 18 years.
Yeah.
All the way up to a book.
Right.
That would share this story with the world.
Yeah.
Because her life had meaning.
Yeah, I felt that message, I felt like God had been speaking through her so clearly to me and to my wife. And I didn't really know how to articulate it. I've done, over the years, now that I'm pastoring a church, I've done messages and used her story, but I just couldn't figure out the best way to articulate what God had done through her until a friend of mine said, hey, I want you to come to my church and I want you to tell your daughter's story, and I want you to use John chapter 5 where God, through Jesus, brings wholeness to this man to pull Bethesda, and I want you to use an iceberg as an illustration. And so I was like, okay, let me put that together. So I really, really began to dive into wholeness, the idea, the concept of wholeness, the concept of the iceberg. When an iceberg breaks off of the North or South Pole, it bobs up in the ocean. And we only see 10% of that iceberg above the surface. 90% is below the surface. And it's really a picture of us. We have so much of us that's below the surface that we are trying to hide, that we're trying to push away. And so many of us spend all of our effort trying to patch up what everybody sees on the outside. And so when you see my daughter, who's 18, she's in a wheelchair, she can't talk, she's fed with a tube, You know, she's unable to use her hands or legs. Um, when you see her on the outside, she looks incredibly broken, you know, and it looks terrible on the outside. But after you get to know her, uh, my wife and I were just in her room the other night, and for like 30 minutes, we're just sitting in there by her with her. It doesn't take very long to know that she is one of the most whole people you will ever meet. Down below the surface of her, where you can't see, she has such a purity with God and a wholeness with God. And so, you know, the message that we're bringing out now is this idea that wholeness doesn't come because you finally fixed all the problems in your life, or that you finally are able to be approved by everybody, or everybody likes you. That's not where wholeness comes from. Instead, wholeness comes from what God says about you. And it's a very simple message. It's not very complicated. And that's what God says about, I love what you said about God. God gave us that message from the doctor. You know, I'm thankful for that message. When I first saw it, I was so angry. But over the years, I'm so appreciative of it, because it drove me to Jesus. You know, it drove me to really find that what Jesus says about us is the most important thing. It's not what we do. It's not what other people say about us. It's not even what we say about ourselves. But it's what Jesus says about us, that he accepts us, that he loves us, and that he's in control. And when we find that truth and we let it just rest down deep, way below the surface of our life, then we will be whole. You know, that wholeness comes up. So when I share my daughter's story, I'm not looking for like sympathy or for people to say, wow, look, you're such a great person, you take care of a special needs daughter. I actually am excited about sharing her story because I feel like she's a great mentor for everybody. You know, she exudes this message of wholeness, and she demonstrates this message of wholeness in such a powerful way, non-verbally.
Well, I can see that you had your Nineveh experience, and like Jonah, reluctantly went kicking and screaming into the calling of the message that God would implant in your heart. And it could not have been easy to navigate through it. But yet, at the time when clarity had to come, clarity came. Yeah. And you answered the call. We've been talking with Robin Steele, excuse me, author of the new book, How to Be Made Whole, and answer to the whole question. What is the whole question? Well, people ask how. We're going to explore wholeness, the whole question, a little bit more about the iceberg, and how prayer may not change our circumstances, but how it may change our calling and our perspective and our message. We'll be right back. Shalom. I'm Messianic Rabbi Eric Walker, inviting you to join me and my special featured guests twice per month with Rabbi Zev Parat and Carl Gallups, and monthly with Dr. Michael Heiser, Dr. Michael Lake, Dr. Timothy Jennings, Dr. Mark Baker, Dr. Jeffrey Johnson, Drs. Michelle and Mark Sherwood, Dr. Kim Moss, Derek Gilbert, Peter Rosenberger, Brandon Gallups, Steve Fair, Stephen Black, and Sean Tabbitt for in-depth insights into Israel, prophecy, the unseen realm, the brain, spiritual warfare, overcoming shame, mysteries of the Bible, prophetic insights, the sensational and the supernatural, caregiving, addiction recovery, understanding the divided heart, same-sex attraction, and much more. We're proud to feature some of the greatest biblical minds from both Israel and around the United States. Check out our featured guest lineup and 24/7 feed on ignitinganation.com or watch by topic on any device with our free apps. If you can't find what you need, you're just not looking in the right place. Follow us on social media and download our free apps today.
With today's smartphone technology, news, information, sports, and entertainment is widely available and almost unbounded. But what about the information that believers in Yeshua are looking for? Well, now there's an app for that. Igniting a Nation now has apps available for Android and iPhone. With our app, you'll gain access to everything you would in our website, from our featured guests to our live streaming shows. Visit Google Play or the Apple Store and download Igniting a Nation's new app today.
Shalom. I'm Messianic Rabbi Eric Walker, inviting you to join me and Israel's #1 rated guide, Edo Canaan, for our annual Israel trip. Our 2022 trip is now open for registration for our 18th trip to Israel. Our trip will take us from Tel Aviv to the Galilee, down to the Dead Sea, and 4 nights in Jerusalem. You will walk where Yeshua walked and watch the Bible turn from black and white to living color. Visit ignitinganation.com/events and download the registration form today. No, it's not too early to take advantage of our payment plan designed to fit any budget. All of our trips sell out, and we want you to experience this life-changing journey. Registration is now open for April 2nd to 13th, 2022, and we promise you, you will never read your Bible the same way again. Shalom and welcome back to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heart lines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, Messianic Rabbi Eric Walker, and we're talking with Pastor Robin Steele, author of the new book, How to Be Made Whole, an answer to the whole question. Robin, welcome back.
Oh, thank you so much.
So what is the whole question?
Well, you know, people want wholeness. I think everybody's wanting wholeness, but they're struggling with, how do I get it? How do I get wholeness? And maybe a follow-up question is, can I have wholeness and have trouble at the same time?
You know, I think about jigsaw puzzles. You go to the store and you look at the picture on the outside of the box, and the outside of the box is whole. And this is what the finished product's going to look like.
Yeah.
But what if you didn't have the picture to go by? What if it was a blank box and you had to assemble the pieces? There's a possibility you could assemble it differently than the way it was meant to be put together. They may have uniquely cut it so that it could be several different things, but if you use all the pieces and they all fit together in one place, then through the assembly of broken pieces leads to wholeness. And I think we want the easy way. We want the microwave way. We want the instant way. But there is not a single character in the Bible, not one, whose path was simple and easy, who was not persecuted, tormented, stumbled, fell, lied, cheated, deceived, betrayed, questioned, challenged, doubted, fought,
Right.
disobeyed. Not one of them. Not one. But yet, through this transformation process into becoming a new creation, without Messiah, without this new creation Paul talks about in 2 Corinthians 5:17, you have no chance at wholeness.
Right.
There will always be the last piece of the puzzle. All the other parts are there, but that last piece, you can look all over for it, and it can never be finished, can never be whole until that piece is put in place.
Right.
And this journey is the answer to wholeness, is that you have to be on the journey.
Yeah.
You can't get to wholeness by sitting in your rocking chair in the middle of a living room.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have encounters with God.
Yeah.
And you've had this encounter, and not only this encounter, but many others, because you're caregivers.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many complications in caregiving. The needs of the caregiver also meeting the needs of the one you're caring for, and the demands, and making sure that, and we actually do a program once a month on hope for the caregiver, where we encourage caregivers to take time out from caregiving to make sure that they get the spa day, they get the shopping day, they get their nails done, they get their hair done, they get, if it's a woman, they have a system where there is relief, because you're always looking, always checking, always wondering, because you've been given an expiration date, except the ink isn't legible.
Right. Mm.
You know, they wrote it in indelible ink
Yeah.
6 to 12 months.
Mm-hmm.
That ink has faded. Right? It's now a blur.
Yeah.
There's an expiration date. I have an expiration date. You have an expiration date. Kennedy has an expiration date.
Sure.
It's just not the one man can put on us.
Yeah.
And so, in your example of the iceberg, you actually break it down into layers.
Mm-hmm.
And the journey, you would think that the top layer would be the focal point.
Mm-hmm.
That would be the apex.
Yeah.
But it's actually inverted.
Yeah.
And it's a fascinating example and metaphor for our journey with God. Help us understand those 4 segments.
So that surface is where, it's what we look like, it's what we dress, it's even our job, it's what we have on social media, it's everything people sees, and it's very, very temporal and emotional, and it's just so many things happen on the surface. And we think that they're so important, but below the surface are these other layers that many people have tried to forget about. They thought, man, if I could just forget about this, ignore that it happened or whatever. And so I feel like right below the surface are just the things the mistakes we've made, things that we don't think are that big of a deal, but we don't really want to tell anybody about them. And so our mistakes, our sin, the things that we've done, actions we've done. Below that would be these deeper things, like emotional things, places where we've been a victim, things that have happened to us that have affected our emotions and our perception of the world. And so that's a big piece of us. Below that, though, I feel like the deepest level is our conscious thoughts and even subconscious thoughts about who God is and who we are. And that's the very core of our being. What do we think about God, and what do we think about ourselves? And every other part of our life is influenced by that idea. So if you have a bad perception of God, then it's going to infect everything. If you have the healthy perspective of God, it's going to affect everything. So instead of trying to patch something on the surface or try to even fix your mistakes, if we can go down to the deepest parts and really, as you just said, fall in love with the Messiah, fall in love with Jesus and understand who he is, then it is going to bring a process, a chain reaction that's going to work its way through our entire being. So I spent a whole chapter in the book talking about that idea of the iceberg and the levels, but I think something that's so important is it's not a complicated thing. It's not like this secret silver bullet that we've never heard of before. I just feel like we've been so stuck in a selfish stupor, a selfish rut, that we've ignored the thing that we already knew, which is that Jesus Christ, he wasn't just someone that's going to come tell us what to do, but Jesus Christ came and demonstrated. He demonstrated what it would look like, and um, I just I'm hoping and praying that people can see through the story of my daughter and our life that God, at the very core of our being, loves us dearly. He accepts us before we do anything right. I was talking about Jesus demonstrating this. When Jesus was baptized, um, this glorious voice comes from heaven. This is my beloved Son, in whom I'm well pleased. Listen to what he has to say. It's basically the message that comes from heaven as Jesus is baptized. And this is before Jesus did any miracles or raised from the dead, gave his life for our sin. The Father proclaims this identity over Jesus. And then Jesus goes into the desert and is immediately tempted to not believe what the Father just said about him. And that's the problem with humans, is that we keep falling to that temptation to not believe what God has said about us. And we keep chasing after everybody else's approval and everybody else's salvation. We think that's going to save us. Instead of just listening and resting in our identity from the Father. So that's really important. And then you said it, you also said it earlier, like if we're not communicating with God, if we're not talking to God, then we're going to get off course. We're going to start believing something else that's not right. And so if we can continually just have conversations with God about that, we're going to stay in that healing. We're going to stay in that wholeness. So in the book, I throw out, I have a whole chapter on prayer and hearing from God, and I try to really strip away the pressure from prayer. I don't know about other people, but I love my church that I grew up in. I love my pastors and parents, but there's also a heaviness of prayer and a weight, legalism of prayer, of like, you have to pray a certain way, you have to pray for a certain amount of time. And I hope that people can find that prayer is not this really complicated, hard thing to do. But if you get to know Jesus, you get to know God, our Father, then talking to him is just a natural response to that relationship. It's going to build the rapport. And the greater rapport we have with God, the greater attention span we have with God, and so it just keeps building on itself.
In the 18 years since Kennedy was born, if you can look back and describe who you thought God was,
Mm-hmm.
then to who you know God is today, how would that look?
And that's a great question. God's a lot nicer, which is ironic because I would think God was nice if he healed her, but instead there was a time that I was praying for healing so much, and I was just exhausted, and I really felt like God speak to me and say, I love your daughter for who she is. And you are trying to change her so much that you're not really loving her for who she is. You're wanting her to change so much that you don't really understand who she is as a person. And I just started getting this new idea from God about my relationship with my daughter that's not based on any sort of performance or ability. And I started thinking, like, my daughter is the happiest person I know. in her mind, she's not disabled. She knows that she doesn't know that anyone would make fun of her or doesn't think she's right or normal. My daughter has not spent one moment of her life trying to earn my approval or try to entertain me. My daughter has an incredible smile. You know, she smiles, she laughs, and for 18 years, she's not one time ever faked a smile or a laugh. It's always authentic. She's never trying to impress people. She just is. She's just herself. And she rests in being herself. And the fact that God loves her in that place without being able to perform, all of a sudden that's contagious to me. I think, well, if God loves her that way, he loves me that way. And I don't have to perform for him. I don't have to grow a church to a certain size. I don't have to sell a certain amount of books. I don't have to do anything for him to love me. And man, all of a sudden my idea of who God is completely different than this performance-based idea of always, some people try to strive to, entertain other people and get their approval, but if you're a real religious person, you spend all your time trying to impress God, and strive for his approval. And that was me for many, many years. And so my daughter has brilliantly taught us this glorious side of God, of his love and his acceptance.
Our idea of wholeness would be certain size, certain weight, certain looks, certain achievements, certain... But yet, some would look upon Kennedy as broken, but you see her as whole, even in the brokenness. She wears it externally. We all wear it internally.
That's so true. Yeah.
And we can look at her and see the differences. What if all of our insides were out and put on display like hers are?
Yeah.
What would be the assessment of the joy, of the wholeness, of the elephant man, the stories we've seen, the way people respond? If we could see behind the cloak, behind the mask, are they really any different?
Yeah.
They just have a different cover.
Right. Yeah, part of our problem with having an intellect and an ability to communicate and see and read and watch TV and all that is we ingest constant messages about what is right and good and pretty and all that stuff. And so it's just tough. It's tough as a human to process all of those messages and try to compare ourselves to those things. It's just really, really difficult. We see people that do look a certain way. They are popular. They're famous. They have a certain body type. And so all those messages, thousands a day come at us, whether it's a billboard or an internet ad or TV show, conversation. And so we are inundated with those messages, and we are constantly evaluating, do I match up? Do I match up? Do I match up? And the blessing of my daughter is she doesn't get those messages, which she's disabled, and people would say, well, she doesn't get those because she's disabled. And I think, well, what a great disability, if you didn't have all those messages coming at you, and the only thing you knew is to rest in him. So it just really points us back to the importance of listening to the Father's voice, resting, stopping, slowing down. Because if we keep chasing after what we see, the elephant man or whatever's out there that is supposedly good, supposedly popular, it's just such a distracted way of living. that we will constantly be chasing after wholeness, and it will always be elusive. Because at some point, yeah, you might lose 25 pounds. You might get so many followers on social media. You might get some of those things, but the kickback or the benefit from that is so temporal. It is so temporary, and we're constantly going, well, I need to lose more weight, or I need more people like me, or I need to get another raise at the job. So it's just this constant. If we keep chasing after those voices, it's constant rat race, really.
When you walk into a room and you see your daughter and she's looking away and you speak, does she look towards you and recognize your voice?
A lot of times. There's sometimes she doesn't. There's days that she's really tracking. She'll look at us, she'll smile, I'll talk to her, she starts laughing. There's this great connection. And then there's times that she's kind of zoned out, honestly, and those are difficult days.
Isn't that a perfect example of us being tuned into the Father's voice and being so distracted? Isn't actually Kennedy a perfect reflection of our walk with the Lord? In, out, blockages, sometimes in our own heads, but yet if we truly let our light shine in her authentic way, you said that every laugh and every smile is pure.
Yeah.
That's whole.
Absolutely. No performing, no fake, no forced actions. Doesn't always get it right. A lot of problems, a lot of health issues, a lot of inabilities, but at the same time, just full of integrity. There's no gaps in the spiritual component or the motive department.
We've been talking with Robin Steele, author of the new book, How to Be Made Whole, an answer to the whole question. You can find out more at mademeaningful.com. It's a beautiful journey and a beautiful picture into what would be a tragedy. But we don't serve the God of tragedy. We serve the God of hope. And a message written on a clipboard by a doctor that the parents understand that she will not have a meaningful life became a challenge to them to make her life meaningful. And this book is a testimony to how much meaning her life has had. Robin Steele, thank you. Thank you for sharing her story and your story with us here on Revealing the Truth.
Oh, it's been my honor, my privilege. Thank you so much.
God bless you, my friend.
God bless you.
We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll bring you the next edition of Revealing the Truth.